If you're looking for a glaze that is super stable, looks good on texture, and or has a kind of a nature vibe to it, today's video is for you. In today's video, we're going to be looking at one of the commercial glazes that I have the most experience with, and that's Amaco's Wasabi Celadon. I bought this glaze, it was one of the first ones that I bought, and I purchased it in the brushing form, and I liked it, so I went ahead and purchased it in dipping form. So I can talk a little bit about both, what's the same, what's different. I'm going to share one of the glaze combinations with Wasabi Celadon that I like the most. And this video is going to be a little different than the ones that you're used to, not only because you get to see me, but because we're going to skip the process of you watching me test out a new glaze and doing the actual glazing itself. We're going to skip to the end, to the good part. And so it's all results today. And that's because I have a ton of examples of Wasabi Celadon because I have been using it for so long. So with all that, let's dive in. First off, let's talk about what a Celadon is, or what the Amaco Celadons are. So Celadon is kind of a broad term, but with Amaco, it refers to a specific line of glazes that they have. And these glazes are a little different than your ordinary ones because you can mix them together and you're going to get a predictable result that looks a lot like the color that you're actually putting onto your pot. So most glazes you can put it on and it's, let's see here. I've got this one. You put it on and it's like this light pink color. Well, this is Coyote's Amethyst, and it's going to turn out to be a super purpley pink, very fun glaze. So it doesn't look anything like what it goes on as. And some glazes like Amaco's Nimbus, for example, that goes on a dark gray and it turns out this beautiful blue color. So the Celadons look like what they are. The specific hue of them might change a little bit. This is Amaco's Mulberry Celadon, which is a purple, so it turns out a dark purple. But you can already tell when you put it on that it is going to be purple. So that's number one. You can get some really predictable results and you can just mix these glazes together, the Celadons. So I could mix, I haven't, maybe I should try it, but I could mix Wasabi and Snow, which is their white Celadon, together, and I would get some version of a lighter, more opaque green. And actually the opaque bit is important to talk about. So Wasabi, you can see here, it is, oops, this has got some clay on it. It is translucent, so not transparent, but translucent. That means that, you can see the carvings through it after it's fired. All of the Celadons are fairly translucent, some more than others. There are two exceptions. One is Snow, which is fairly opaque white, and Obsidian, which I actually haven't used, but is a fairly opaque black. So that's important to know. Those are a couple of outliers. And then the different colors, some are more translucent than others, and it just kind of depends on the color itself. So that is what Amaco's Celadon glazes are. A few other characteristics of the Celadon line from Amaco is that it's super, super stable. So we can have a look at this here. This is a little tester vase that I did with wasabi and jewelry from the ceramic shop. So this was just, I wonder what these two glazes look like together. And this is what I tested it on. And you can see the line where the wasabi is. It has not budged. I dipped it in and that was it. It's really tough to get a Celadon to run. I haven't managed it yet, and I fired them up to probably a cone 7.5, not intentionally, but things happen, and they haven't budged. I will say that sometimes on these little pendants, you can kind of see where it's a little thicker at the bottom. So this was hanging when it was fired. And so, there is a little bit of a movement, but here, so it's a good example. I mean, may have moved within where the glaze was, but you can see the straight line of where I dipped this into the Wasabi Celadon bucket. So super, super stable, and that's very handy if you have a glaze that's a runner. I don't have any examples of that here. The closest one, I guess, might be this one. This is Laguna's Power Turquoise on the top and Wasabi Celadon on the bottom. Same deal, just wanted to see what they look like together because I like that kind of turquoise and green combo, blue and green combo. And often what happens when you layer one glaze over another is that it runs more than either one would on its own. And that's what happened here. So you can see a little bit of movement from this Laguna Power Turquoise. Not much, but it has kind of feathered down there a bit. But the Wasabi did not move at all. And I have used this to good effect with other versions of the Celadons. Like this. So this is the mulberry celadon that I was showing. Are you going to help? Get out of there. That water's not for you. Nope. Nope. Just put something over that so you don't drink that. All right. Okay. This is the mulberry celadon that I was showing you earlier. So before and after. That is my cat. Do you want to go inside? I'll be right back. I don't think the cat actually wanted to go inside. I think she just wanted attention, but she's inside now. So, as I was saying, mulberry celadon, super stable. This is Coyote's amethyst. And along the border of the two, I have put Spectrum Pearl White. And that is a notorious runner. Pearl White will ruin your pots and ruin your kiln shelves without any encouragement whatsoever. But you can see that the Celadon has stopped that running from happening. Probably would have gone at least to the bottom of this mug otherwise. So Celadon's very good for stopping running. Amaco Celadons. Okay, let's show you some of the examples on carving that I have here. So this is Pottery Supply House 519. It's a white stoneware clay. And this is a really deep carving that I did. And so you can see that it shows those lines really nicely. Where you see the variation in the glaze, that is because that is how it was applied. Okay, so that's important to know about the Celadons, that if you dip it in your glaze bucket and it comes out, it's got little pinholes or it's got, you know, a run. If you see here, I collected a little bit more just because of the way it would have come out after it was dipped. And the way I was holding it, there was a little bit more glaze here and now it's thicker there. There's a spot here where the glaze was thinner on the pot and it's thinner on the result. Because this glaze doesn't move, that means that you do need to be pretty careful and pretty tidy about your glazing. So if you dip it or paint it and it's got some pinholes, just take your finger and rub those over to smooth them out before you put it in the kiln. Otherwise you will be disappointed. So this carving was a little bit shallower, not quite as hefty as this. And there's a variation, right? So these were thicker, deeper grooves, and then these little curlicues were thinner. They were done with kind of like a pen. It was a diamond course graffito tool. So shallower and deeper, and it shows both nicely. I will say that if you do too much of a dip or put too many layers on, it will get thick enough to obscure the carving. And you can see that a little bit here, where this is all really shallow carving. It was all done with that sgraffito tool. And you can see the carving, but it's not as clear just because that space isn't as deep for the glaze to pool in. The other thing I'm noticing as we're talking here is that there is a little blister here that didn't heal. That's pretty rare for the Celadon. And it could be that there was something under there that burnt off, or it could be that that was there and I didn't kind of smooth it over before I put it in the kiln. So either one is possible. So that is Wasabi Celadon on texture. And again, you can see it here. I love using the Celadons on texture. It's really pretty. This is also a really quick dip, whereas these were a longer dip. And so you can see the difference in the color just from the thickness of the glaze. So I want to pause here with an important note for all of you. All the things that I'm talking about today, your mileage may vary. And that's true of any glaze review you see anywhere on the web. You really do want to do your own tests and make sure that you like the glaze on your clay and with your firing schedule. What I get here may not translate for you. And actually, you know how I just said that this was a difference because of the thickness of the glaze? That is true, but this is also porcelain and this is stoneware. And there's not much difference in the lightness of the clay, but there is a little bit of difference. And that's going to make a difference, especially in a glaze like this that is translucent. So always test your glazes. If your test happens to be an entire mug, there's no judgment here. We've all done it. Patience is supposedly a virtue. It's not one I possess. I do, however, have cats. What would you like, Indy? Go up there and hang out? All right. Before I move on from this topic, I do want to talk about underglaze as well. This is an example of underglaze painting underneath wasabi. And what I did here was I took a fern that I literally picked down on the trail, a couple of blocks from my house. I put it onto the clay and I sponged underglaze over top, removed the fern, and then you've got the imprint or the negative space where the fern was. I fired that in a bisque firing and then dipped it in the wasabi. So it's a forest green underglaze. You can kind of see it popping through a little bit here. What do you think, Indy? Just checking everything out. You can see the forest. You can see the forest green poking through here. So you can see what color it was. And the Wasabi Celadon kind of makes it a little darker, but it is still a green color. So that's what it looks like for me on my clay with actually, I don't remember if this is Amaco or Amaco underglaze, but anyway, that is wasabi with underglaze. I have another example I need to get for you. Okay, the cats and I have some more examples for you. Before I carry on, a quick shout out to the maker of this mug, Andrew McCullough with New Ceramics Studio here in Fredericton, New Brunswick. If you're in the area, they are now carrying not just glazes, but they've got the dry ingredients that you use to make glazes, tools, they've got all sorts of stuff. So pop in and check them out. And he makes lovely work. Okay, here are our examples. So we have too much stuff there and a cat. These spoon rests were made with a reclaimed clay. So there's some buff speckle in here, which would have manganese in it. And you never quite know what you're going to get with reclaim if you mix it together like I was. I've started separating it a little bit better. And I've started not using the manganese because these little spots show up everywhere. It's wild. Anyway, it looks lovely. It's a little bit more, I don't know, earthy of a color than it is on the porcelain. So the underlying clay does change the color. And I will say that I have not put this on red clay. I have done Storm Celadon on red clay, and it just kind of disappears because the clay underneath is so dark and it's a translucent clay. What I wanted to show you on this one is the crazing. Typically, I have not had the Celadons craze very much at all. It's happened on the Reclaim, and it did happen on Pottery Supply House's dark granite clay. Did not like the Wasabi Celadon. So the crazing is just a difference in the expansion of your clay and of the glaze. So that's why I say test, to make sure that the glaze is going to do what you want it to do, and you're going to be happy with the results. So let's talk about the dipping version of the glaze for a minute. I started out with the brushing version and then bought the dipping version after a while. These are not cheap glazes. So this dipping bucket, I think at the time was, I don't know, maybe $80 or $90 US. I happened to be in the States when I bought this, pre-tariff. Don't hate me. And I think I priced them out recently, and they're at about, I want to say $160 a bucket. So they're not cheap. To give you an idea, I can get the same amount of Laguna Power Turquoise for $100, give or take. But I have been using this for a year, more than a year. And it's still about half full. And as you can see, I use it a lot. So it does go further than you think it's going to. If you are making a living from pottery, it's, well, you're probably not watching this video anyway, because you probably already know all about glazes. But it might not be cost effective for you, depending on your business model. But on the one hand, I thought I should, try and come up with my own clear glaze that's stable and so on. But on the other hand, I've had really consistent results with Amaco Celadons. So I will probably keep using these for a while. There is a difference between dipping and brushing. The difference is how many cats you accumulate. That's the difference. Really? Okay, guys, come on. Come on. Down you get. Down you get. Okay. The difference between brushing and dipping is that you need to be really careful when you're brushing. So if you're brushing, you're going to do 3 coats. You definitely need 3 coats of the wasabi. And you want to use a good fan brush. They look like this. One with natural hair bristles, because it does a better job of soaking up a lot of glaze. And glazing is not like painting. You want to really get a good thick coating of glaze on each time you brush. So you're going to dip it in, you're going to get fully coated in glaze. And then the first time you brush, especially with the Celadons, you're going to go in one direction, and then you'll let that coat dry. And then when you come back, go in the other direction. And then the third coat, do whatever you want. The key is that you don't want to leave brush marks behind, because this is translucent. So that's why you want to vary your brush strokes, so that you don't kind of see that line along where your brush is moved, if that makes sense. The dipping version is much easier. You just put the pot in, take it out, and let it drip off, and away you go. But there is a disadvantage to the dipping version, which I will get to in a second. If you haven't used the dipping version like this of a glaze in your home studio, it can feel pretty intimidating. It's kind of mysterious, and I found that when I was thinking about it, I really spent a lot of time trying to figure out exactly what you were supposed to do. I was afraid that I was going to mix it wrong. I was going to turn it terribly. Whatever. If you can mix Kool-Aid, you can make a dipping glaze, at least the commercial versions. Amaco in particular, they give you a sheet of paper in every bucket that tells you exactly what to do, exactly how much water to put in there, what you need to do. Basically, you take the powder, you take the water, you mix them together, you run it all through a sieve, and Bob's your uncle. So super easy. Do not be intimidated. And if you are starting with a commercial dipping glaze for the first time, the Amaco ones are a solid choice. I think that Amaco actually have videos, if memory serves, on how to mix a dipping glaze. So I'll go look for those and I'll put them in the comments below this video if I can find them. I told you there was a disadvantage to the dipping glazes. And there is one, and it is very specific to Amaco. I don't know what it is about Amaco's formulation of the glaze, but they can be really difficult to layer. So what I find happens is that if you use the dipping glaze, so in this case I poured snow, Celadon, which I also have in the dipping version, into this, and then it dried before I put the next glaze on. And then what happens is that the glaze on top doesn't adhere properly, and it kind of cracks and it flakes. And particularly with the Celadons, because they are so stable and nothing really runs on them, what happens is you see all of those cracks after it's fired. So if that's the look you're going for, cool. If not, beware. I have had some success with kind of taking my finger and rubbing over these. I have had success with re-wetting it, like taking a spray bottle and spraying it down and then kind of smooshing it around. But the best way to avoid this, I have found, is to put the next glaze on before the first one has dried. So as an example of that, I have one of my favorite combinations with wasabi. This is a dipped version of wasabi on the Pottery Supply House 519 clay, and I have put seaweed, Amaco seaweed, over top on the handle. It's a really fun combination. This is an example of a dish on buff speckle from Pottery Supply House, and you can kind of see there. It's an interesting one because it depends on the light. So if you get the light just right, you get this beautiful blue shining effect that happens in there. It's kind of gray today, so I don't know that it's coming across very well, but I will try and dig up some photos and I'll overlay those on the video. So with this one, I dipped it, and then before it dried, like it was dried to the touch, but the bisque soaks up some of the moisture, right? So it's not really dry for a little while. So fairly soon after I dipped it, I took my brush and brushed on the seaweed, and it worked beautifully. So that is a tip that might work for you. As always, your mileage may vary, so please test, but especially with this one, because I have read varying reports of what works and what doesn't work with this. So test it to make sure that it's going to work for you. Other dipping glazes that I've gotten, I haven't noticed that problem. So I suspect it's an additive that they put in there, probably something they use to keep it suspended, because one of the things I really like about these is that they don't really hard pan. So when you get a dipping glaze, and especially if you leave it sitting for too long, right? Like it's a while in between glazing sessions, the minerals can fall out of the glaze. That's normal. They're heavier than water. That's just what happens. What hard panning is when they fall out and they form this hard pan of material at the bottom of the bucket. And it is a pain to mix that back up. I have not had that problem with the Celadon glazes. They stay suspended pretty well. If I leave it for a really long time, it'll need a little bit of effort to get it mixed back up. But if it's a couple of weeks, I think even a month, it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to do. So That is the advantage to these dipping glazes compared to some of the others that I've used, like the Ceramic Shop's Jewelry, for example. Terrible, terrible hard panning. Brutal. So Wasabi Celadon has been a really, really reliable glaze for me. I've used it for about 1.5 years, and I've had really consistent results with it. The main thing that can go wrong with it is any flaws in your clay that are there will not be hidden in the slightest by the Celadon. Typically, they won't be hidden by glaze anyway, but with the Celadons, it's just going to magnify anything that might be wrong with the glaze, or sorry, with the clay. And sometimes, you know, if it doesn't adhere properly, you do get, on one of these here, you can get some little spots. And I have had crawling. I have had really good luck with just putting a little dab of glaze on that spot, putting them back in the kiln. And because it's not a runner, it heals up quite nicely and still looks good. I would love to hear if you've used Wasabi Celadon, and I'd especially love to hear if there are glaze combos that you've used with it that you love. I find it particularly challenging to get examples of combos with different companies. So Amaco on their website have a page that shows a bunch of different combinations with their glazes, which is awesome. But like these two, for example, I don't know that I've ever seen a combination of Ceramic Shop's Jewelry or Laguna Power Turquoise and the Wasabi Celadon. So if you have one that's a go-to or that you've tried and you love, I would love to hear about that. Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found something useful in today's video. If you're looking for other glaze reviews, I have a bunch of those on my channel, so go check those out. And I am going to be doing more of these reviews where I talk about greatest hits, but I'll find a better name than that, of the glazes that I've used a fair bit and have experience with, and can kind of give you a really good sense of how they'll perform on different clays and so on. And actually, if you've made it to the end of the video, you get to help me pick. So let me know down in the comments whether you would rather see, for the next video, Laguna Power Turquoise, the Ceramic Shop Jewelry Glaze, or Coyote Amethyst. Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.